Hello everyone, welcome back to Hooking A. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make a granny square. This is a very popular pattern in crochet. You can see it used for a myriad of different things as they are squares. They're very versatile for making multiple items such as bags, clothing, cushion covers, blankets, hats, scarves, you name it, someone's probably made it out of a granny square at some point. If you pick up any crochet magazine in a high street shop, you'll no doubt find at least one pattern that's based on the granny stitch. The stitch is entirely made out of trebles and chains, so it's not as complicated as it might first appear. The trebles are what make these little groups of stitches, and the chains are what make these gaps here. What I'm going to be doing to show you is I'm actually using an example one here that has a different colour for each round, and hopefully that should make it a little bit more clear for you so that you can see how each round is worked. But I'll be going through it with you step by step. Something else that we'll be doing with these is we'll be using a chain in replacement of a treble. It's not too complicated once you've got your head around it, so I'll explain that now. So what I've done here is I've done a magic loop. You can do a chain and slip stitch it together to make a loop if you prefer, and I have done 4 chains coming out of this loop here. So I've got chain 1, chain 2, chain 3, and you can see I've placed a stitch marker here which I'll explain in a moment, and then here's chain 4, and then I've got my working loop on my hook still. This particular chain is going to take the place of a treble, which is what the 3 are, and then a chain in between groups of stitches, but it's actually going to be part of the last cluster that we do in this round. And it's how we get it to join up at the corner without any gaps where they shouldn't be. So I've popped the stitch marker in there just to make it a little bit more clear for you when we get back round to this point, but we're going to be working our way all the way around here first until we get to there. So your first cluster is just going to be 3 trebles into your loop like this. Sorry if you can hear this yarn squeaking. So we've got a group of 3 all done in the same place, and then we create what's going to be our corner by doing 1 chain on its own, and then we go to the next cluster. So it's 3 trebles into the loop, and that's our second group done. And then the third one, exactly the same, we just chain 1, 3 trebles, sorry again about the squeaky yarn. It is cotton, so it's got a little bit of grip to it when the hook's going through. So ignoring that starting chain there, we've got 1 group of 3 with a chain in between, 2 groups of 3, chain in between, and our third. So we're going to do a chain in between here. And for this one we're only going to work 2 trebles instead of 3, and this is where we're going to come round to that chain I did at the beginning where the stitch marker is. So before I do that, I'm just going to pull the back of my magic loop just to close that up, make it a little bit easier. And then here, this is going to take the place of the 3rd treble in that cluster. So my hook will be going into that 3rd stitch where the stitch marker is. I'm just going to take that out because it can be a little bit tricky getting your hook in when there's a stitch marker there. So there we go, hook's through there, and I'm going to do a slip stitch just to close that off without adding any height. And I'm just going to pull that completely closed, and you can see we've kind of got a bit of a square shape going on here where those chains are in between each group. We're going to spread this out now and create some proper corners which you'll be able to see a little bit more clearly. So to begin the next round, which in this example here is the pink one. So this one here is the blue one. Obviously you just can't see those corner parts that are blue because they're hidden under the stitch to the pink. So now we're going to do this second round. So first of all, we do another slip stitch into this gap that we've got here. And that means we're then working actually in that gap and not in the top of that last stitch. And as we did before, we're going to start with a chain of 4. So 1, 2, 3, and that's going to take the place of a treble at the end. And then 4 is our chain. So here we're going to do another cluster of 3. And when we get all the way back round to the end, it will finish in the same way where we'll be doing just 2 trebles there and joining them to that one to create the third. And at that point we'll have 2 groups in that corner like this. And to get round to our next corner, we're going to be doing a chain again. Each time you do a chain, it will create a gap, and you would be doing it above each cluster that you've got as you continue to work around. And then because we're at a corner here, we're going to be working 2 groups of 3 rather than just 1. So there's 3, and then chain 1, and then another group of 3. So you're always doing 1 chain between each group of 3. There we go. And you can see that's given a little bit more shape this time because we've got the 2 in that one space. So we'll come around again. So chain 1 and go into this corner. Again, cluster of 3. Oops. Gosh, this yarn. You can see that the fibres are splitting apart slightly. I'm putting my hook in. Can make it a little bit tricky. Unfortunately, that's kind of a peril sometimes with cheaper yarns, is that they're not spun very tightly, so you can get a bit of a gap between the threads. But never mind. So there's another corner done there. Chain 1 to miss out there, and then we're doing the 4th corner, and then we'll finish the first one where we've got that chain of 4 at the beginning. So that's 3, chain 1. You're always doing 1 chain between your group of 3. Sorry about this squeaky yarn. That's again sort of cheaper yarns. You sometimes hear a bit of a squeak as the hook sort of moves against them because of the amount of friction that they make. So now I'm going to do another chain 1 here. That's going to bring me above this cluster, and then here we've got that chain of 3 to replace one of our trebles. So I only need to do 2 here to finish off the round. So, and that's going in the place where we slip stitched into that corner at the beginning. So 1 and 2, and then come across here and then into that 3rd chain. Sometimes you might find that the first chain gets pulled quite tightly as you're working, so if it's tricky for you to count from the bottom, you might find it easier to check from the top which one is your 4th chain. So you can see here's the top of that treble, so I want to miss out this chain, and this here is going to be the 3rd one. So it makes it a little bit more clear. You can see down at the bottom here that this chain's been pulled quite tight, so if I was trying to count I might accidentally miss that one and end up joining in the wrong place. So slip stitch into that 3rd chain again and that's created our final cluster in this corner. And then to move on to the next round, again you're going to slip stitch into that space and carry on as before. And then as you work your way around, every time you're going to miss out a stitch, every time you're going to miss out a cluster, it's just 1 chain between those. Sometimes you might be tempted to thinking that you've got to do 3 because you're missing out 3 specific stitches, but because they're going into one place below, they only count as 1 stitch, so you're only doing 1 chain. And as you go along, I'll show you on a slightly larger one, you'll have between each corner multiple clusters like this. So here we've got a chain, a group, chain, group, chain, group, going all the way along. But when you reach your corner, it's always just those 2 in the same spot, and that's what makes this corner for you. So granny squares, very, very versatile, as I was saying. What you can also do with them is just keep going and going and going, and make a larger and larger square. There's no limit to the size that you want to do. It's very simple to make something like a blanket as one large square, or you can make smaller squares and join them together. That can be quite handy way of using at the ends of your yarn if you don't want to sew them all in at the end and then have to put together a blanket. You can actually use the thread at the beginning to join your squares together and sew them together to make a blanket, which you can see is something I'm working on here. It's for one of my daughters. And yeah, you just darn those together, or if you're feeling adventurous, you can even have a go at crocheting them together, just doing either a slip stitch to create a seam between them, or even a double crochet, and that's another way that you can join them together. Completely limitless with how you actually join them. Obviously you don't have to join them in a square or a rectangle. If you wanted sort of a staggered edge, you could do that, make it in sort of a hopscotch pattern. It's completely limitless. There's so many possibilities. And once you've mastered a granny square, a basic one like that, you can use that stitch that's called the granny stitch also for flat work. So I was saying before about how granny squares are very, very popular. This is kind of the one of the most common crochet things you'll see here. This is a granny stitch done in rows, which is creating a blanket, and obviously I'm alternating colours in this. The granny stripe blanket is synonymous with crochet, probably one of the most iconic patterns that you'll see. A lot of people seem to have these in their homes that a relative has made at some point, and they become a sort of family heirloom and get passed down. Again, they can be worked sort of into massive, massive sizes to cover a whole bed. This one that I'm working on, if I kind of pull it across, you can see this is pretty large. This is about double bed sized. It's one I've been working on for a while. I'll probably finish it at some point, but I do tend to have a lot of projects on the go at any one time. And then once you've mastered the basics of the granny square and the granny stitch, working squares or even other shapes in the round has so many possibilities. So I've got another example here where you can see the centre of this one is more like a flower. So you've got these clusters that are like in petals. The one right in the centre here kind of looks like a star. And these are all just made again with chains and trebles, and it's just creating the gaps in different places. And these ones are just clusters of 2 rather than clusters of 3. On that second round, we've just got the normal granny stitch, and then for that last round, the corners are normal, and then they've just got half trebles across there. This pattern was just one from a book, I think, but I've got a couple of books that are just all about squares and blocks. There are literally thousands out there. You can create some gorgeous patterns just using this basic working in the round and making corners. So this is My Little Pony themed yarn blanket that I'm making for my other daughter at the moment. But the types of blocks that you make, again, you can make up your own. There's so many possibilities. I think one of the most beautiful things I've ever made was actually a top that was made purely out of granny squares that had quite a lot of gaps in it, made by chains, so it gave quite a lacy effect overall. What I will do at some point, hopefully I'll have it ready for the next video, is I'll pop up a link to sort of a gallery or something of some of the work that I've done in the past. So if you are interested in seeing some of the things that I've made when I used to sell, things that I've made sort of for friends and family and for myself, I will make sort of a group of photos and put a public link up for those so you can check them out. So that's granny squares for you. Hopefully that was clear enough, but if there are any points you'd like me to elaborate on slightly or go over again, please do leave a comment below the video, and I'd be more than happy to sort of go over a few pointers with you. You're welcome to send me a message on YouTube if there's anything that you would like me to do a video on, or if you want some tips on a particular technique. I'll also pop a link to a playlist of my introduction to crochet. So far there's 7 videos. I've made a playlist of them actually on my channel, so you can watch them in order, sort of from the beginning techniques right up to now. If you are watching from desktop, you should see a little pop-up up here somewhere, a little grey box that will link you to that. If you are watching from a phone or a tablet, unfortunately that feature doesn't come up on the YouTube app, but I will pop a link in the comments below. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye.